And education is tough because it's tough to be able to accommodate different types of brains, especially when not everybody's brain understands the other person's brain. So it's just a tough thing. So I think one is just being open to everybody has their own way of thinking and how they're wired. And if you can kind of empower your child to advocate and realize what his strengths and weaknesses are and advocate for those. So one thing, like we said, was response time. Sometimes with processing, that's very specific, is give me a minute to respond before you keep asking more things. And being able, teaching them that you can let people know that. So you can't make them follow it. You don't control it or anybody else's reactions. But if you just, a lot of times just breaking the ice like that is going to open up a huge amount of possibilities for communicating things.
Welcome to the Four Peaks Parents Podcast with your host, Thomas Miller. Today we are joined with Ashlyn Lelej, who is a speech pathologist, who is the owner and founder of Speech Matters. She has been doing this work, for 20 years. She specializes in everything from feeding challenges, right? Any kind of language challenges. She is an expert at helping families take a look at whether or not, right, speech is potentially one of the, possible situations, challenges, et cetera, that could be causing some, challenges for that child. So welcome, Ashlyn, to the show.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. Did I get your intro pretty good?
Yes, that was perfect. Yeah. Better than I could do. So very good.
Oh, no worries. And real quick, tell us a little bit about kind of, your journey to get where you are and, where your career began to where it is today.
Right. So I graduated graduate school in 2002. So it's been quite a while. And I worked in a hospital for a while, worked in some school settings, and then I worked in private practice, which is my favorite because you kind of get all of it, which is great. And then in 2009, I kind of branched out and opened Speech Matters, just because I kind of wanted to be able to run it exactly how I wanted to run it, do the therapy exactly how I thought it would benefit everybody the best. And that's kind of where I've been since 2009, trying to grow my practice and just, learn as much as I can possibly learn in all the different areas of speech therapy.
So, people who are listening, of course, everyone who's listening is a parent, and they may know a bit about what the heck, speech therapy is or speech pathology. I think sometimes it's kind of forgotten, things to explore, look into. And we were talking offline about, how often, again, people go toward so many other things naturally, which is super important from, of course, traditional therapy, psychologists, psychiatry, et cetera, whatever, OT. A little bit about, what the heck you do and how valuable and viable, right, the work is that you do, and how it can really be a missing link for a bunch of kiddos, right, that could be struggling academically, socially, emotionally, et cetera.
Right. So we work with all sorts of language issues. So can be, you have lots of different areas of language. So you can have receptive language, which is how you're processing information, the concepts for your age, how you're organizing things, executive function, all of those things in your brain. And then you have expressive language, which is how you put all those things into communication. So you can have, if you kind of have a little bit of a glitch in any of those areas, then it can really affect your processing, but especially your expressive language. So we work with obviously all ages. So it's pretty easy to tell when they're little if they need speech because they're not speaking. So you can diagnose that pretty easily. Doctors refer all the time, that sort of thing. Oh, go ahead.
No. Keep going. You're great.
Okay. Yeah. So, and then as they get a little bit older, sometimes it can get trickier. So if they've either had speech therapy and kind of graduated from speech therapy at a younger age, sometimes when they get into like middle school years, teenage years, the demand gets so much higher that you can start to see a little bit of those language issues at that point. And it's kind of, that's less diagnosed, it's less referred, it's harder to tell. So I definitely work with that as well. So that's pretty much what we do.
And it's, a delay or a pause in, say, speech, whether it's expressive or receptive. You mentioned executive functioning, mentioned processing speed, is obviously going to affect so many other things. So speak to what parents could be seeing that, again, we're not going to now all rush as much as you're very open to, folks listening, reaching out to you, and we'll give an opportunity at the end for folks to reach out and how they can connect with you. Obviously, not all roads lead to speech and language or processing, let's say, issues. That being said, speak to what that could look like, because a lot of times I think, things are missed and or misdiagnosed and or things are left to language. And we sometimes, as parents or as the educational system or even as providers, can come up with, lazy diagnoses and even potentially use the word lazy right on a child that has, elder issues or might have speech issues. So what are some things for families to look for, like you said, in those later years that may begin to show up and running roughshod, if you will, all over that kiddo's performance?
Yes. So one of the things is where I have a lot of parents say that their kids have always made really good grades, they're brilliant, and then all of a sudden in ninth, 10th, 11th grade, sometimes they start to get to the point where their grades are dropping a little bit. So obviously that can be an indicator that there may be something else going on. And it's also because of that demand, obviously, because you do get a lot more demand. And also because of just the changes in the brain at that age too. So they've got a lot more to kind of process. So sometimes if you have very mild or relative weaknesses in processing, when you get more demand, your threshold's going to be lower, if that makes sense. So when they get into the upper grades and there's more information, there's more things that they have to do, there's more processing, the load is much more. You start to see good grades crumble a little bit. So they'll start to do things like stuff's not getting turned in on time. They're not getting horrible grades, but they're getting maybe C's, B's or C's. They're usually getting A's, that sort of thing. So that's one thing that you see, is that all of a sudden they start to have a decrease in grades, basically, but also that executive function around grades, like turning things in, that kind of stuff. You see that a lot in kids with ADHD, that sort of thing, but you also see it sometimes with underlying language issues, because that threshold hits where they can't cope with all of that. So they start to crumble a little bit with those things. Sometimes that can be a language issue. Sometimes you have a child who has overall wonderful language, so it would never be flagged in school or by a pediatrician, that sort of thing. But then you can have some relative weaknesses. Everybody's got strengths and weaknesses. Sometimes kids will have a relative weakness. So sometimes they'll have a relative weakness in processing speed. So their IQ is really high. Their language is well within normal limits. So nothing would ever get referred to a speech therapist, if that makes sense. But when they do get to us, however, they get to us by, somebody else referring them, or them just saying, I feel like it's a communication issue. Can you test my child? A lot of times what you see is within normal limits. So no diagnosis of like a language disorder, because they're within normal limits, but you can see a very relative weakness in certain areas. So on some of the subtests, like higher level verbal formulation, there will be a significant difference. So it's not a language disorder, but it's a language to make sense. So you can start to see gaps in them being able to express themselves, them being able to keep up with the work, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and just for folks listening, because we've talked a bunch on this show about processing speed. Processing speed is one of the domains of IQ, and speak a little bit further about, because again, processing speed doesn't necessarily, like you're saying, automatically equal a speech delay, but that's really an important piece, because a lot of times when people hear processing speed, they do tend to think ADHD, and while of course that could be play, there's other things there. What would be a family's next step? They have a kiddo that has, again, and so one of the things that I took a lot to the families I work with and who are part of the Four Peaks Parents Program is, when we look at IQ, is there variability, right? And the traditional educational environment in a weird way, kind of sadly, does great with the traditionally average intelligence. And, if someone has a working memory of 102 and, they have processing speed of 98, and they might have, 100 in visual spatial perceptual reasoning index, or I'm having a brain fart.
That's okay. I'm following.
Oh my God, it'll come to me in a second. Oh, verbal comprehension. So they have a 99. So the school system is going to do really well with that kid that has little to no variability across those different domains of their
Right.
IQ. Whereas a child, like you said, could have 130 IQ, but the speed could be in the 22nd, percentile or something.
Right.
So talk a little bit about what you would recommend a family do in that situation if there is a processing speed issue.
Yeah. So, and like you said, usually by that age, if there's any, concerns with the child's performance or academics or, anything, they're usually already tested for IQ or, that sort of thing. So you usually have those scores available to you because it is part of the IQ testing. If you don't, that could be a route. I'm not saying go get your child tested. If you have any concerns, you have to get an IQ score. I don't mean that at all. But if it's already there, then it is helpful to look at those. And technically, if there's at least a 15-point difference in, one area versus another, that's statistically significant. So that means that is an area of identified weakness for that child, even if it's well within normal limits. So if you have 130 IQ, but your processing is 110, 110's upper average, but it's 20 points from their total IQ. So it can be causing that asynchronous, I don't know if this is a made up word or not, but asynchronicity, asynchronous development there, where one is not really in sync with the other. So it can kind of cause hiccups with that. So one is to just look at that testing and see, where the discrepancies are with those, even if they're, because a lot of times it's a relative weakness, even if it's within normal limits, that can be causing a hiccup in that. So that's one thing. Another thing is just to really kind of talk with your child and see what they feel is going on, because it's their brain. They really, a lot of times when they're asked or when you allow that, just them to say what's going on as a parent, they really do open up and tell you specific things that are helpful. So one could be that, like, I just need a little bit more response time. Like, you can't just ask me a question and me answer it right away. Give me 2 minutes to answer it, and usually if you put those little things in place from what the child gives you themselves, that can go hugely before you even get to therapists or anything else. That can be a lot. And then the other thing is if you do see that difference, or, your child, you feel like they're just not performing where you think they should be performing with their ability, you can always get an evaluation to where we can look at those things and see, are there any relative weakness areas or, relative areas of weakness? Because even if it's within normal limits, if there is a relative weakness, or if it's identified through symptoms and other informal means, doesn't even have to be on the testing, speech therapy can help them with that. Whereas if you do tutoring or counseling, which are wonderful things, they're not going to touch that part of it because it's specific to speech.
Yeah, I think that's really important. And I think, again, there's some psychobabble in our conversation, which is totally fine. And I want to make sure parents, listening are tracking. And so, when you hear receptive versus expressive, right? I think we all have, at least I have 2 teens at home. So, there's the selective hearing where I don't think they listen to half of what the hell I'm saying, and we know in general, right, that I say this all the time to the parents in the program that I'm coaching, the longer this conversation or interaction is happening, the less effective it is. Because whether you have a child with receptive language issues or processing speed or ADHD or what have you, short attention span theater anyway. So, it's not getting through. And so I like the word you talked about, like, it made me think of my wife, because my wife is dyslexic. And so my boys and I are convinced that she's like purposely not listening half the time because, we're like, we always joke she needs to get like evaluated for
Uh-huh.
like hearing aids, even though
Mhm.
I know she's just a processor, number one, and
Right.
she's
Mhm.
taking it in, she's going to spit it back.
Mhm.
She also has can be
Mhm.
inattentive, and so if there's like we joke if there's like a cricket somewhere outside,
Right.
you know,
Right.
she's like focused on that and can't. Whereas, and I know the research says multitask isn't really the most effective, but I
Right.
actually because of my more ADHD brain, I like
Mhm.
I like music going while I'm cooking, while
Right. Mhm.
whereas my wife
Mhm.
is like the tone of silence. We joke, it's
Right.
like you have to
Uh-huh.
be. But when you're there and you're talking, I mean, she's brilliant. She's smarter than me. She has
Right.
a high
Mhm.
prove it
Mhm.
as well. But the point is,
Mhm.
I think those little hacks are helpful too. Like you said, just even giving someone time and asking
Mhm.
your kid and empowering your kid, like,
Right.
what is it like
Mhm.
for you if you have this teacher that's like a speed train,
Right. Mhm.
Maybe
Mhm.
your child is unbelievably intelligent, but they've gone offline.
Mhm.
And now
Right.
maybe you have additional issues that now
Mhm.
they're possibly acting out in school. Let's say now they're labeled
Right.
ADHD and oppositional defiant when it
Mhm.
all dated from potentially a processing speed issue or a language issue.
Right.
So I love that. Do you have any other hacks that are just super tangible like that families can do to support their teen or tween, right, in better understanding their
Mhm.
diverse neurotype? Because that's really all we are is you're a different
Right.
neurotype than me and the next person.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. I do think kind of going in and thinking that, this term neurodiversity is somewhat new and it's it's not it's specific, but it's not. You could think of it as
Yeah,
everybody is
yeah,
neurodiverse because you've all got a different set of
yeah,
skills. You've got a
yeah,
different way that your brain is naturally wired.
yeah.
If you and education is tough because it's tough to be able to accommodate different types of
Mhm,
brains, especially
mhm,
when not everybody's brain understands the other person's brain.
mhm,
So
mhm,
it's just a tough thing. So I think one is just being open to everybody has their own way of thinking and their
uh,
how they're wired. And if you can kind of empower your child to advocate and realize what his strengths and weaknesses are and advocate for those. So one thing, like we said, was response time. Sometimes with processing, that's very specific, is
mhm,
give me a minute to respond before you keep asking more
mhm,
things.
mhm,
And teaching them that you can let people know that. So
mhm,
you can't make them follow it. You don't control it or anybody else's reactions. But
mhm.
if you just a lot of times just breaking the ice like that is going to open up a huge amount of possibilities for
Mhm,
communicating things.
mhm.
Teachers, brothers and sisters, parents, anybody. So
Absolutely.
that's one thing. Another thing too is just really under helping children understand, but also helping parents understand that as teenagers, tweens and teenagers especially, you're already going through so much change and
Mhm,
development. So your brain is constantly changing. It's not fully developed. So there's going to be points where you kind of are in the weeds a little bit. So
mhm,
it's okay to have periods where not everything is going beautifully.
mhm,
So
mhm,
kind of walking them through that to say, okay, you're in the weeds now, but this is, how can I
mhm,
help you get to what are your goals? How can we help you get there? That sort of thing. So advocacy, increased response time, and letting them know that it's okay to get some help.
mhm,
So if they do feel like, they're kind of behind and that they're upset and mom's not yelling at them, but parents are on me all the time and teachers are on me and I just want to be
mhm,
left alone. And that's where some of that kind of, poor choices, bad behavior comes from. Just
mhm,
letting them know, hey, if you want to talk to somebody about, or if about whatever it is the struggle is, then
mhm,
that's open. Here's the different options
mhm.
versus kind of telling them, I'm going to take you here or I'm going to do this, like I'm going to take you to a counselor or I'm
Yeah,
going to take you
yeah,
to the speech therapist to get tested, kind of
yeah.
through those things.
And I
You know?
think I think it's such a balancing act. I had a session recently with a family, and it was such a beautiful thing because the teen is on the spectrum and is wanting less scaffolding, which is so cool, right? And we talk about the primary task of being a teen is to separate and individuate and, you know, create autonomy. And we're seeing so much failing to launch these days, kind of pause button in the adulting, and not all of that, of course, is accounted for by neurodiversity, let's say, issues. But when you have a neurodiverse child, there is sometimes pauses in the social emotional, in the life skill, in the assertiveness, in the advocacy. So it was really a beautiful thing to kind of see that balancing act of how does he receive services from a place of self-love and self-worth? Because if I am of this, you know, unique neurotype, and again, I agree with you, I think every student is different, and the school system, more often than not, as much as they may try to have 82 different APs and 504s going on in the same classroom, and of course, if a child has an IEP, the school should absolutely accommodate that to the best they can. That being said, yeah, there is this homogenization. So I like that it's just back to basics and having a real honest conversation and empowering your kid to have agency. You know, one of the things I do a lot with the families I work with is I always look at what's an I can't versus an I won't. And if child cannot, let's say, immediately articulate something and they do need more time, that's an I can't. But if they won't work with the speech language person, or they won't, you know, continue to utilize said resource or said aid or said learning specialist or advocate for them, so that's on them. And I think it's really hard with tweens and teens because they are worried, right, about being the other.
Yeah. I do think too, now I forgot to mention this, one little specific thing that you can do is if you're, you know, if whatever's going on with your child and you're kind of having the conversation, you know, we talked about whatever, turning this in, it's still not turned in. You're going to get a 0. It's going to make your, you know, and that's kind of what you're focused on, because you kind of, you know, as a parent, you have to be a little focused on that stuff. And they're, you know, whatever they're coming at you with, like, you know, whether it's I did turn it in and it's clearly not in, or whether or not they're just struggling with getting everything done, that sort of thing. It's really good to, if they're willing to do this, to tell them, I know it's hard for you to explain what's going on. Maybe you can write it down. So sometimes even if they write it down, whether it's a feeling or what's going on with them, or whether it's something specific, like I'm having a hard time organizing this paper I have to write. If they write it down, it's so much clearer than trying to manage that emotion while they're speaking, because it's in black and white, it's on the page. And then you can read it. It's much easier for them to communicate sometimes the tough things in writing. So
yeah, no, it's such a good point. It's so funny. My wife and I, again, I'm such a wordsmith, because of my, you know, career, and words mean so much to me, and words don't mean crap. And it's really funny to her, not they don't mean crap, but they're not as important. And there's also other shit from my childhood in terms of like being bullied. So I was like, ooh, I'm gonna, you know, be this nerd who knows all these words. And then you go into a therapy and it's all words and nerdy words, you know, crazy babble. And so it's easy to hide in that. And that is also part of my identity. And then what you're saying is to not weaponize, right, the words for someone to write it. For my wife, it wouldn't be writing, it would be drawing a picture. I got to just Temple Grandin speak recently, and she was awesome because she was talking about how since the time she was little, she thought in patterns. And she talked about how we really shouldn't think about, which I think is so brilliant, ASD, you know, 1 through 3 as an autism. We should think about, does someone think in pictures? Do they think in patterns? Do they think in words? Do they in feelings or sounds? It was like, that's so much sense to me because I'm an empath and I think in feelings and I think in words. My wife's always like, let me draw you a picture. And I'm like, like
right. Like it's not helping me. Right.
no, but that's her preference, and that's it can be very helpful. So that idea of just like standing inside your child's story, and I think the piece you just said is so true that when they're dysregulated, it's to do 2, 3, 4, 5 tasks at once.
Right.
It ain't happening. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's another thing too, like that if they are dysregulated, obviously you want to back off and give them time because I don't want to have to respond with a response that's going to be taken, if that makes sense. Like with a response that's going to be recorded or expected to be exactly what I think at that moment if I'm dysregulated. Because if I read that later, I would think that's not really where my head usually is. So one thing is to recognize dysregulation and give them a little bit of space because nobody's going to be thinking straight at that moment. So there's that. But there's also, if one thing with, especially with expressive language that we see, to get specific about language parts, which we see in little children who are diagnosed with expressive delay. So for whatever reason, they're not talking. The more you come at them with direct questions and more demand. So, what color is this? You know what color this is. Tell mommy what color it is, which is how most people talk to toddlers and young people, from teachers to everybody. The first thing they're going to do is shut down. So partly because that is what's tough for them. Their expressive language is a weakness. And so if you come at them trying to pull more out of this weak area, it's going to shut down. So the more you come at them, the less you're going to get for expressive language. These are with toddlers who are diagnosed with expressive language. But if you take that and you move it to a typical language teenager, the same thing's going to happen. So if you continue to come at them, express that better, tell me I don't understand this, and this, they're going to probably shut down a little bit and not be able to use whatever language they have. So that's a huge trying to come at them a little bit less direct with direct questions is good. So like, oh, well, I wonder how that made you feel, that sort of thing versus, why didn't you turn that in? Some stuff like that. Not that anybody comes at them thinking that's what you're saying to your child.
No, I
but they
love
do
that.
get a lot of direct questions.
I love that. It's reminding me of 2 pieces from the program, the 4 Peaks Parents Program. One, I talk about concave versus convex, and think of the convex shape of why didn't you turn that in? Why didn't you get to AA? Why are you still dating that person? Why why didn't you go to sleep earlier last night? Why didn't you shut off your phone?
Right.
It's forcing a concave position for your child, or more likely than not, they're going to push back and have to pop you out. That's not to say there shouldn't be standards around phone use and turning off screens and all that, of course, but coming alongside, particularly around something that could be underground, like an eating disorder, eating issues, or body image, or your loved one is your child is dating someone that you don't really love, or your child is hanging out with a friend, and every time they come home, they do smell like nicotine, or this friend is very well known to have problems at school. So instead of why you're hanging out with them, or don't you realize, I really like that. There's another technique called match, pace, lead, which is like matching your child, pacing your child, and leading your child, versus just the sprint out of said funk and toward said solution. That's really nice. I'm kicking myself a little bit hearing this in a good way, because I'm like, I give my kids a little bit more time, because
I know I have to remind myself to do it with my children too. So it's very easy to see it in other people. But
and I think what sucks, for all of us as parents, and we become transactional versus relational at times, right? Where sprinting A is like not for the faint of heart. Like, holy shit! I was watching some all these mom reels the other day about these moms getting ready for May, and they're like stretching, and I was kind of like, what are they, I swear, I was like, what are they even thinking about? And then literally last week, my kid had a play. We had a soccer tournament. We have a Memorial Day tournament coming up.
Mhm.
We, my other son has a performance. We just had tryouts for like the club they play for. Like, it's just like,
Right.
I don't think, oh my God, May is like no joke, you know, and then of course we
Right.
all get
Right.
cold. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's very easy to get transactional and then to miss these
Mhm.
moments of, oh, my kid is, even something as obvious if they're diagnosed with dyslexia and you're
Right.
talking for
Mhm.
10 minutes and, you know, or your child has
Mhm.
ADHD. You mentioned
Mhm.
the word executive functioning, and it's kind of interesting because I'm reading this book, which is all about ADHD. And they say
Mhm.
there's no definitive definition of executive functioning. How
Right.
would you define
Mhm.
it?
Right. So I would, if I had to define it, it is one of those kind of slippery slope things. So if I had to define it,
We all know what you're saying. I know what you're saying.
right, right. I would say it's just basically your ability to organize your thoughts and execute that into action. So, and it's a natural ability. If there's difficulty in executive function, it's
Hmm.
hard for you to connect all those and
Mm,
make follow from A to Z. So how it manifests like an ADHD or something like that is because you have to have attention to follow through all that stuff. So if
mm,
you're interrupted, then your brain has to attend to something to follow it through to the end. And of
mhm.
course, people with ADHD, they can attend beautifully. It's just not regulated 100%. So,
Yeah, that's
right.
great.
So,
That's a good
right.
answer. I like that answer a lot. What the book
Mhm,
said, which I loved, and it was very similar to what you said. It was like they said we can lump it into
mhm,
like 4 or 5 things: organization,
mhm.
planning, execution, time management.
Right. Mhm,
But the
mhm.
theme that runs through all of them, which you're describing, you've already said this in this interview today, is emotional regulation. I mean, if you're
Right.
dysregulated,
Mhm,
there's a pause in all of those
mhm.
things. And like you
Right.
said, they're tracking, right?
Mhm,
They're hearing,
mhm,
right? They're absorbing.
mhm.
Um, then the implementation piece, right? Or the
Right.
sequence,
It's the
or the execution
right.
is off. Yeah,
Mhm. Right.
yeah.
So I think it's good to notice that and that that's not like a flaw in your neurology. It's
Hmm.
not it's almost like a it's just it's a difference on where neurodiverse comes from, but it's you don't
Yeah.
have to look at it as a flaw like, well, why can't you just go from A to Z? Their brain
Hmm.
doesn't work like that. If somebody was pulling your attention from whatever the person without ADHD was doing all day long, you would have the exact same issues executive function wise
Hmm.
because you have to have the attention to connect those to the end. So I think that's what the one thing I really like about the any kind of therapy with ADHD, whether this is through counseling, occupational therapy, psychology, speech therapy, whatever venue you're going through to match that child's needs. I think
Hmm.
the really good thing with that is letting them know that's fine. That's how your brain works. You don't have to try to force yourself to attend.
Hmm.
It's okay because your brain does not work that way.
Hmm.
So, but here it's good to like, just the little things, write down things, make a note, put something that's going to help your brain connect
Hmm.
to the next dot so that you can get from A to Z and not
Hmm.
get somewhere in the middle.
It's like bridges across archipelagos.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
not
And if
being
you
Maria,
don't
like that original island. And then I
yeah.
think too,
Mhm,
like, it's really helpful because my son has working memory deficits, one of my
mhm,
sons. And, you know,
mhm,
so it is like starting over. There isn't
mhm,
amnesia, if you
mhm,
will, if there isn't a
mhm.
system to play. And the
Right.
system is like the kind of the housing of, I always say, like,
Mhm,
the system, you know, helps
mhm,
the habit. It's almost like
mhm.
um, it's the housing of the habit, right? And
Right,
so if
right.
we don't have that system, right, that
Mhm.
habit probably doesn't succeed. It probably fails, right?
Right,
Because it
right.
doesn't have time
Mhm.
to grow or germinate, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that system might change too. I think that's a good thing to note that like if that system's not working for you anymore, that's fine.
Mhm.
We'll adapt. Try something. It doesn't mean you're not working hard enough or
Yeah.
you can't do it. This isn't working. So how do we adapt it to help you? I think just having that openness and that this is how my brain works, it's a great thing that my
Mhm.
brain works this way. How can I still get to where I need to go with
Yeah, and
those
I
things?
think so much of sorry to kind of crap so much on the education system here. Sorry, education
It's
system,
totally
but I do feel like the education system creates a lot of shame. It is like a shame stick.
fine.
So
Mhm,
many of
right.
the kids I've
Mhm,
worked with throughout my career over 20 some odd years,
mhm,
working with kids and tweens and teens and
mhm,
young adults. Now, of course, coaching parents, it's so
mhm.
obvious there was a pause in that person's development, and then more often than not because the parents are horrible people, but because they
Mhm.
didn't know, or they were busy, or they were this, or they were that,
Right.
or the kid was a number at the school. Other things got
Mhm,
built around that. The
mhm,
comorbidity of ODD, oppositional defiant,
mhm.
ADHD is so high. It's like the most
Right.
obvious thing in the world because you start
Mhm,
wearing that on your sleeve, and then
mhm.
there's push back against some authority figure. The authority figure begins to look at you, right, in this
Mhm.
position of you're
Yeah.
in opposition. The word disruption, I always say, is a
Mhm,
great word in business. If you're disruptive to
mhm.
a company, you're a bazillionaire, right? I mean,
Right.
um,
Mhm, mhm,
Tesla's disruptive to the oil industry, and
mhm.
Netflix
Right.
very disruptive to Blockbuster, hence it doesn't exist.
Yes, that's
So
true.
it's same thing with Uber Eats or whatever the next thing. So it's
Mhm.
so hard. It's really hard for the kid in that moment to realize
Mhm.
that they're going to be okay, and
Right.
there's this bigger
Right.
world out there that isn't going
Mhm.
to necessarily um,
Right.
be the mirror to hold up,
Mhm.
basically their failings or deficits on a daily
Right.
basis. I'm not a
Right.
fan of removing anything that's hard at all. I'm the biggest fan of helping your
Right.
kids face adversity.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
what I like about Aren't You Today, and I just think is applicable and germane to any parent listening, is just like
Mhm.
slow the fudge down, which is hard,
Mhm. Yeah.
and ask your kid, like, whether it's
Mhm.
how they like to learn or how do they
Mhm.
like to communicate. And even something as simple like, I love the, like, do you want to write it down, or you want to
Right.
draw a picture, or
Mhm.
even coming alongside them and accompanying them versus the, like, why didn't you
Mhm.
turn that in? Like you said,
Right.
it's going to get
Mhm.
their hopes up. What are some other
Right.
just general tips that you encourage parents to do to help thread even more, whether it's empowerment, agency, just
Right.
a, be- a better relational dynamic, or a better, situation for that child to navigate?
Mhm. I do think one thing is to, and I know that I've done this in counseling before and it has helped. So I know it's in counseling a lot, but one of the things that I do think really helps with parenting in general, so you could use it for both parenting or a specific, like if your child's just can't verbalize what he's trying to say.
Mm, okay.
So if your child's just having a hard time expressing themselves, one thing that's really helpful is to kind of paraphrase or repeat your understanding of what they're saying or
Mm,
how they're behaving. So
mm,
if they look really overwhelmed and they're not making any sense, kind of give them time to do that before you cut them off. You're not making sense. Like you're being
mm,
overwhelmed, just, that
mm,
sort of thing,
mhm,
which is hard not to do as a parent. I
mhm,
acknowledge that personally, but kind of let them finish, let them be overwhelmed, and then say back to them, I can tell it looks like you're feeling a little overwhelmed. You
mhm,
know, if you need some time, that's
mhm,
fine.
mhm,
Even something as simple as just paraphrasing their body language to them,
mhm,
in a way that's saying, "This is what I'm understanding," not in a judgmental way or like, "You need to do this," that sort of thing. But,
mhm,
"I understand that you don't like that teacher and that you're having a hard time following through with you feel like you're overworked, you're having a hard time following through." And
mhm.
then at least that way they know that either your perception is on the money or off, and they can hopefully explain that
Yeah,
back to you.
I think
Um,
that's such there's so much there. I talk a lot about observe, the words like what you just said, which are great, like I could be wrong,
Mhm.
what it looks like, smells like, feels like, right?
Right.
Do you realize that you're talking really fast, or you're standing in my
Right. Mhm.
face, or do
Right.
you notice that you're kind of shut down? Have you
Right.
noticed you're really keyed up right now, right?
Right.
Observations
Mhm.
are so helpful. They're helpful to ourselves too, even partner to partner. If you have a co-parent out
Right.
there, as simple as just
Mhm.
like, hey, you may not realize it, but you are talking
Mhm.
really loudly or dominating, right? The
Mhm.
conversation. And
Mhm.
let's do this offline. There's so
Right.
much. I really, really appreciate everything you said. It really got me to do a better job. Like, I'm really thinking about, you know, that whole diverse neurotype, and how do I recognize, because I am such a proponent of multiple
Mhm.
intelligences, that
Mhm.
someone who has a high verbal comprehension or a high
Right.
this, you know,
Mhm.
no way, especially with AI, especially now, so many workarounds, self-driving cars, and um,
Mhm.
so some of these things for young people that
Mhm.
historical rubrics, let's say, of intelligence or speed
Right.
bumps aren't going to be there, thankfully, in a good way.
Mhm.
But it's
Mhm.
it's there's such an opportunity that I got from today. If we just come alongside our kid, we
Mhm.
seek to understand a little better,
Mhm.
and we look at, again, what are their preferred communication learning
Right. Right.
some, styles. And then, of course, there's folks like yourself, right?
Mhm.
If there is a communication gap, or
Mhm.
whether it's receptive, expressive, what have you. So thank you so
Right.
much. Oh my God, you're so helpful.
Yeah, no,
And
it's been great.
yeah.
I did wanna say too, really quick, I have never heard that description of the convex versus concave,
Mm,
or I
yeah.
did it wrong, concave versus
Yeah.
convex, but
Yeah.
that's a perfect description of it.
Me
I
too.
like
That
that
is Tom
one.
Miller. I've stolen everything in my work. Everything has been stolen throughout the 20 something
No, it's not
years.
stolen, it's an
That
education.
one made sense to me in terms of, like, looking at family dynamics.
Yeah,
Um,
it's a good
yeah, I'd
thought
love
process
for
to think through.
I'd love for folks to know how they can connect with you, to learn
Mhm.
more about Speech Matters, as well as to possibly explore the opportunity of working with you.
Right, right, definitely. One, the easiest way is just through our website. It's the easiest one. It's just speechmattersclinic.com. And of course, there's a contact button that goes directly to me.
Mhm.
So, and then, so if you have any, I'm very open to any discussion or questions before, whether that turns into like an appointment or an evaluation, that sort of thing.
Mhm.
Because, everybody's different. Some people aren't going to be appropriate for those things. And I may say, I don't really think speech pathology would meet your child's needs or an
Mhm.
adult's needs either. We see adults as well.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so that's usually the best way to get in touch with us. And then we always respond pretty quickly, just with whatever, questions that they have. And then we do in clinic, obviously, because we're in Charlotte, but we also do telehealth. So
Nice.
yeah, so we can do that too if you need it.
Yeah,
But
that's great. I appreciate your transparency, and I learned so much, just again, about just better approaches as a parent, more patience, more
Mhm.
empathy, more empowerment, coming alongside. And, as always, any parent listening that has a
Mhm.
teen or tween or young adult who's struggling, whether that's because of mental health, addiction, or divergence, or just is stuck, please go to the
Right.
4peaksparents.com website,
Mhm.
immediately sign up for the free newsletter. You obviously can have access to previous episodes, and just
Right.
book a discovery call. We can jump on a call and see if the program is right for you. But thank you
Yeah.
so much, and I appreciate
Thank
everyone.
you.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
everyone carrying on with the hardest freaking job in the world. All right.
Right.
See you
Right.
next
The
episode of
best and the hardest job ever.
Totally.
Yeah.
It is the second hardest. Awesome.
Right.
Awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's been a pleasure.
Take care. Bye.
You too. Bye.